Hi everyone, welcome to another Thursday Craft at Home. I really appreciate you joining me. It is National Library Week, so I wish a very happy National Library Week to everyone. Although we can't celebrate it together, I'm really excited that I have the opportunity to connect with our patrons, at least in a digital form. So thank you so much for joining me today. So today we are going to be using pieces of nature. I'm using leaves as stamps and stencils for your crafting. So I'm going to be making note cards or thank you cards, but you really can use these for anything that you want to make. And then in the second part of the video, I'm going to be showing you how to use the same method to create a background for a kid's puppet theater. For those of you that have kiddos at home and are trying to come up with activities to do with them, hopefully this could be something fun that you guys could do together. So I'm going to have my lovely cameraman come around and show you what we're going to be using today. So I've got my hot glue gun plugged in and ready to go. If you guys don't have a glue gun, then regular glue or tape is totally okay. And I'm going to be using two different types of leaves for this today. You'll notice the ones I chose have a really something really special about them. So this one, I love the serrated edges and the beautiful plant veins. And then this one has a very unique shape. You know, as soon as someone sees this on paper, they're going to know that it is a leaf, foliage, a branch. So if you don't, I live in an apartment complex. I don't have my own yard, but we do have a shared space where we have some flowers and some trees, so I was lucky to be able to grab these outside. If you guys are doing this craft with your kids, it's a great way to get outside a little bit. Hopefully there's something nearby that you can pick and have them help you choose what you're going to be using today. So I've got my two leaves. For me, I'm using this hard book because I'm on a card table and it's a little bit, the surface has a little bit of give because it's covered in foam. So if you guys are on a hard surface on any table, then you won't need the book, but that's why I have this here. We're going to use each of these leaves in three different ways. So for each leaf, 1, 2, I've got 3 pieces of cardstock that I'm going to be using. If you don't have cardstock or small pieces of paper like this, you can absolutely use printer paper, construction paper, anything that you have on hand. I have a spare sheet of paper just so that I can use paint on my leaf stamps and I'm not getting them on my table. And then we have 2 sponge brushes. Ideally, what I would love to use today is any ordinary rectangular kitchen sponge. Because it has a broader surface area, it'll help you craft a little bit better. But since I don't have sponges on hand, I'm using what I do have, which is these sponge brushes that come in the paintbrush multi-packs. But it's a foam tip, so it'll have that same spongy texture. I have a plate to spread all of my paints. I have 3 paints that we're going to be using today. I'm using acrylic. This is just what I had on hand. Acrylic is a really great versatile water-based paint. Most of the times, because it's water-based, you can rinse it out, but I'm wearing an apron because I don't trust myself. This is a little bit of a messy craft today. And then I have 2 colored pins that match each of my paints. If you don't have paint and pins that match, you can use a different color, no problem at all, and I'll show you how we'll use these when we get going. Last but not least, I have a cup of water to rinse my paint, and I've got a dish rag that I don't mind getting dirty to blot my paint. All right, so because acrylic paint is water-based, it can dry out if you leave it too long, so I always like to have everything ready, and then I like to pour my paint. So I have 2 different leaves. I'm going to be using 2 different colors. Oh, this one's a little thicker. Again, these are just the paint colors that I had enough of for this craft, so you can choose any color that you want. And I will show you guys a really easy way to mix up the paints that you're using is just to add a little bit of a highlight color. And I'll show you that as we go along. So let's start. So I'm going to choose one of my leaves here. The first way that I am going to create a craft with this is to use the negative space of where the leaves are. So what that means is I'm going to paint around the border of the leaf so that the empty space on the page creates the shape and gives a real sense of a botany note card here. So what I'm going to do is with the flat edge of my spongy brush, I'm going to get a lot of paint here. I'm gonna kind of spread it using my plate. Now the key to this is you want your paint coverage to be pretty thin. If the paint was thick and goopy, then it allows you, or it doesn't allow you as much definition once you're doing it. So just make sure that it's spread nice and thin, whether it's on your sponge, on your brush, on your rag, what have you. And then this is the great, so you could just use one color, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna dip this brush in this second accent color. And it doesn't have to be in any particular place, it's just dipped in 2 colors and you'll see how that comes out. So now, to create this, what I wanna do is make sure that my leaves are face up. This is the back side of the leaves, you'll notice the stems, and this is the top or the front side, the side that faces the sun. I wanna put top or front side up, and then what I'm gonna be doing is, as best I can, I'm gonna hold this leaf down on the paper. When you're doing any kind of stamp or stencil, the key is to keep it as still as possible so that you're really getting definition once you add the paint. So as best as I can, this is a little tricky, I'm just gonna hold it down with my fingers. With the flat edge of my brush, as much as I can, I'm gonna put it on the overlap between the leaf and the edge. That way when I press down, I get a nice hard defined edge for my leaves. All right, so I'm gonna start at the top, and you'll notice that I'm just as best as I can, getting in between all the nooks and crannies. You know, it might be a little bit hard to see here. Okay, and then see if it comes up, that's okay, it happens. I've practiced this quite a bit and they always turn out different. So, okay, so now I'm just gonna turn this around a little bit. I'm gonna grab a little bit more paint. So I've got some nice wet paint, but again, it's thin. I'm gonna dip it into the second color here, make sure it's thin, and then I'm just gonna keep going down. So I'm gonna try to get here around the edges. Ooh, and again, this can be tricky, so just do your best. See, mine's moving all around, but that is okay. And then I'm just gonna go down and make sure I got the stem. Okay, now as best you can, you're gonna pick it up wherever you can, straight up from the paper so that it doesn't drag. Now you will notice that I have the general negative space outline of these beautiful leaves here. What you can always do is create a little bit more texture around your shape if you want to just dab the paint that you have on your sponge brush around, kind of soften the edges. The harder you push down with a sponge, the darker the mark is going to be. But if you just kind of lightly tap, you'll notice it gives you this great faded effect. So I'm just gonna move around the gold. We have our turquoise and our gold. Now, the other thing that I like to do with this craft, and this is why I have my pin that sort of matches, is what you'll notice is I can add in with the pin some of the features of the leaves. Now with this, I find that the more you try to add every detail, the less realistic it looks. So if you just put a hint, then it tends to have a more refined look, I find. So all I'm gonna do is add in with this pin the main veins of the leaf here. So I'm just gonna do a quick line, 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 and line. And you'll notice they're not perfect, but it's just the hint. And then I'm gonna add some of the lines that shoot up from there. I don't wanna do every single line, just a few to give you a sense of what this truly is. Again, I'm just lightly touching with my pen. I'm using a felt tip pen. I find that a felt tip or an ink pen are much better than a ballpoint pen because it's just a little bit hard to do with a ballpoint pen. So this is our first note card using the negative space. Perfect. Okay, so let me go ahead and put this up. Now what we're gonna do is use the same leaf to create a positive space stamp. So I'm gonna use the same colors that I did. Now what I'm gonna be doing is painting in, and I'm just gonna put this on a piece of paper so that I'm not getting paint on anything. I'm just gonna cover the rest of the leaves with this turquoise paint, teal paint rather, with gold accent. And again, no right way to do it. Just make sure that the leaves are covered. Now again, I'm just gonna run over it because I want the paint to be covering the leaves completely, but I want it to be a pretty thin layer. That way it'll pick up some of the detail of the veins. Okay, so it's completely covered, and you'll notice we put the paint on the top of the leaves. Now what I'm gonna do is flip it over and place it. I'm gonna do my best to make sure it lands in one spot and place it on my note card. Now what I'm gonna do is hold it down and use my finger to push so that all of the paint on the surface of the leaf is making contact with the card. So I can just go around and as best I can. You can always use the tip of your pen if you find it's a little hard to do it without getting fingerprints everywhere, especially for these smaller ones. The pin is nice because you can kind of push it down and make it stick before you start using your fingertips. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the stem. Make sure that the paint on the stem is making contact with the card. All right, then as best I can, I'm going to pull straight up again. Okay. And you'll notice that although it looks a bit abstract, now we have used the leaf as a stamp using the positive space. So this is the next version that you can make with the same leaf. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and put this aside. And then last but not least, using the leaf with the paint that I have left, you could repaint it if you wanted. You could put a little bit more gold accent on it, or you could leave it the way it is now. For my sake, I'm gonna put just a little bit of this gold color because I think that looks a little nice, a little classy. And then what we're going to do on our third and final note card is place it paint up and glue the actual leaves to the note card. So I'm just going to flip this and put a dash of hot glue. This can be a little tricky to do. Glue, glue, and glue. And then I'm gonna flip it again as best I can, put it in one spot. Ooh. Okay, and then if I don't wanna use my fingers to press down because it generally tends to smear, I can use my pen tip to just make sure that glue is in contact with the paper. And then this is my third and final option. So between all these, they do all have really different looks, but I just think it's wonderful to be able to look at what you have nearby and come up with different creative ways to create something beautiful. So really quickly, because you guys already have the instructions of how to do this, I'm gonna do it with one more leaf that has a really different look, but I'm gonna go a little bit more quickly through it. Now, another way to mix your paint in a really beautiful way is, I could wash this brush off and start new and do pink and gold or do pink and turquoise, but what I'm gonna do is, as much as I can, I'm just gonna get this thick paint off of here, and then I'm just gonna go straight into my pink paint. Let's see how this looks. Again, I'm gonna wipe it so that I have a thin layer. This is looking very bright, and I'm excited because I wanna see how that turns out. Okay, so same thing here. First, we're gonna do the negative space. I wanna make sure that the top of my leaf is face up. You'll notice this is the underside with a thick vein, and this is the top side that's open to the sun. I'm gonna place it down, face side up, and then I'm going to use my flat edge and just make sure that I'm putting my sponge over the edge. Because the serrated zigzag edge is the most beautiful part of this leaf, I wanna make sure that that's really sharp in the stencil that I'm doing. So I'm just gonna flip and then just make sure that I'm doing one fail swoop around here. This looks a little muddy, a little like cotton candy, but hey, that's okay. I'm gonna add a little bit more turquoise. If I want more of one color to come out, then I can just layer that right on top there. I like that look more. Okay, and I'm just gonna kind of spin the leaf as I go around, make sure that I've got the stem there. And then again, I can kind of add in to soften the edges. And then as best I can, I'm gonna pick up the leaf straight up so that it keeps a nice crisp edge. Okay, so, and now I'm gonna use my pink pen to create those beautiful ridges and veins in the leaf, just to give it a real sense of what it is. So again, I'm gonna be really casual with this, not put a lot of pressure, not try to add in every line, but I'm just gonna put the hint of this. So I'm gonna do one straight vein up, and then I'm just gonna have some offshoots here. If you start by putting pressure in the middle and then just kind of lessening your pressure as you move out, creates a nice casual leaf. And then I'm just gonna put just a couple of veins on the outside here to give the sense of what this is. Doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be planned out, just a couple little things here. All right, so that is my second version with these beautiful zigzag edges of a negative space note card that you could use, that you could send. You could use these to write a note to someone. You could use these to write down your feelings. I know that all of us have some pretty strong ones these days, so I hope that this is able to help in some way. Okay, so now I'm gonna grab my second note card, and what I'm gonna do is putting this on a paper backing. I'm just gonna paint the rest of this leaf, so now we can use it as a stamp. So I'm gonna use the cleaner side of my sponge here and just add, I noticed that it kind of happened that I had more blue here and more pink here. So what I'm gonna do is create, why not? I can do what I want, it's my craft. I'm gonna do more blue on this side and more pink on this side. That's a really great thing about paint. There are no rules, and you can, just by changing up your paint colors, make a really different looking craft using the same materials. So I'm just gonna put a dash of gold and a dash of gold here. See how this turns out. Okay, so I'm gonna move my backing. I'm gonna flip my leaf over, paint side down, and as best I can, I'm gonna put it on the paper in one place. Now I'm gonna use my fingers to push down on all of the areas of the leaf so that every bit of the paint that's on the leaf surface is going to make contact with the paper. Now, if you're worried about your fingerprints getting in the way, smudging things, but you want to make sure you get those beautiful zigzag serrated edges down for the stamp, then you can use the top of your pen to get those down. And then I'm just going to make sure I push down the stem, and then as best I can, lift up. How cool. See, this is why I love to kind of add different paint in there. It can look really different from just a two-dimensional shape. Now, the point I made about having thin paint is for this exact reason. If I had really thick paint, then it would just look like a solid shape. But you'll notice, because I used thin paint, that the markings of the leaf veins really came out. You'll see some really beautiful texture in there that just makes the image come to life. All right, so this is our second one. And then last but not least, I'm gonna use my actual leaf. I could add a little bit of additional paint, which I'm gonna do here, just a little bit to give it a little more definition. I'll do turquoise here, and then some nice gold highlights. And then all I'm gonna do is add a bit of glue. I'll do there, on both edges and the tip, and a little bit on the stem to make sure that sticks. And then all I'm gonna do is put it face up on the card, and then press down where I put the glue marks to make sure that it stays. And then we have our third and final option, which is the actual leaf on the card. All right, so these are all of our options. I know I'm a little messy here and have got them laid out a little messily, but when you really look at all of the possibilities of what you can do with one material, that's when crafting gets really exciting, I think. All right, so these are the note cards for you adults that want to use them for thank you cards, use them for letters to family and friends. Now what I'm going to show you is the same technique to create a background for a kid's puppet show that's easy to make. So all I'm going to be using is a piece of white printer paper, 8.5 by 11, and I'm going to grab these. I'm going to grab my other, so let me go ahead and put this sponge brush away. I'm going to grab these additional paint colors. Let me get another plate as well, actually. All right, so now we've got space for the new paint colors. And I've got a little bit more of a variety when it comes to plants. So I'm going to use the same leaf that we used for our card, which is both of these. But I'm also going to use these additional leaves. I have this fern-like plant that I got from my garden. So this is how it normally comes. And then I've just plucked out some of the leaves to give it a little more definition. I'm going to grab these. And then I've also got some blades of grass. So I'm going to grab 4 of those. All right, so to create this background for a puppet show, what we're going to be using is the method of using the leaf as a stamp rather than negative space. You could definitely do it as negative space as well, but I find that it's a little bit easier to use the second method here. So all we're going to do is we're going to pour our new paints. Because this is going to look a little bit abstract in terms of kids using it as a puppet show background, I'm going to use pretty natural colors, you know, colors that grass and leaves would be, so that it's a little more clear what it is. So I'm going to use a lot of light green here, if my paints will cooperate. And I've got a little bit of dark green, some blue, and some black, just to give a little bit more definition. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, I'm going to move my hot glue gun, I'm move my pens, and now I'm just going to use a piece of white paper as backing so that when I paint, I'm not ruining my tablecloth. And what I'm going to do for each of these is use the front or top side of the leaf, just because it's easier to stamp with those. I'm going to use my green paints, and I'm going to do exactly what we did for the cards. So I'm going to add a little bit of green. If I want some definition, I could add a little spot of blue, maybe even a little spot of black. Doesn't have to be in any order. And then I just want to make sure that I've got nice coverage on my sponge brush. All right, so again, using a thin layer of paint because I want to get some of the definition here. I'm going to cover each of the leaves as best I can. Okay, not perfect, but that's okay. And then I'm going to flip it over so that the paint side is down. And as best I can, keep it in one spot. I'm going to press down just like we did for the plant stamps. Just making sure that each bit of paint that's on my stem is hitting the paper. And then as best I can, pulling it directly up so that it doesn't smear. Fabulous. Okay, so the next one I'm gonna do is this beautiful fern shape. I plucked out some of the leaves so that you could see more of the definition. When you have more negative space, meaning something missing, I find that it just gives it more of a plant look. You can tell a little bit better what it is. So I'm going to put this one down. Now again, this is top or front side up. You'll notice these are the backs and this is the top. And I'm just going to grab more of my paint. So I've got some green, I've got some blue. Let's do a little dark green in this one. Okay. And then I'm going to paint the top of my leaves. Again, getting just a thin layer, because if it's too thick, too goopy, then you don't get as much of the detail. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is flip it over and make sure that I'm pushing down using my fingers on each of the leaves covered in paint to make sure that it makes contact with the paper. Again, this can be a little tricky, especially if they're moving around, but just do your best. I'm gonna do that there. Okay, and then when I've pushed everything down, I'm gonna lift up and I've got my paint there. Okay, now I'm gonna take some of these blades of grass. These are really great because I can reuse them over and over again. So I'm gonna get my sponge brush covered in paint, a little dark green, a little blue, little black, why not? Okay, and then I'm gonna use the front or top side of the leaf. With blades of grass, you can't really tell. You just want the side that is a little concave so that you have most of your blade of grass touching the paper. So all I'm gonna do is put it down, swipe it with paint, and then what I can do is just place it here. Now, because this is such a narrow piece of greenery and I don't want my big fingerprints to mess it up, I'm gonna use my pin tip to slide along and push down my blade of grass so that the paint transfers to the paper. Hopefully that worked. All right, so, and then I'm gonna paint my leaf of grass again. I'm sorry, my blade of grass again. All right, and then I'm just gonna basically, what I wanna create is, you know, something that's not just a bunch of blades of grass in a row. So what you can do is you can change the angle. That one I did use my fingerprint, whoopsie. Okay, you can overlay it. So I'm gonna get just a little more paint. Make sure that it's wet each time I'm placing it down, okay? I can make some blades of grass shorter, some taller, but I'm just trying to create a sense of variation so that it's a little more interesting to look at. Okay, now because this is pretty dark, I'm gonna do a bit of bright green in that, okay? And then I'm just gonna keep going, pushing down my blade of grass. If I get some of my fingerprints on it, that is okay. I'm just gonna run this blade of grass right through the paint. That's another way to do it. And make sure that I'm pushing down. Okay, so those are my blades of grass. Last but not least, I'm gonna do this big flat leaf to create a nice, beautiful shape in the corner here. Let's do this one a little more blue, why not? Okay, so I'm going to, again, paint the top or front side. Green, a little more blue. All right, and then when I have a thin layer covering the front or top of my leaf, I'm going to flip it over and as best I can place it in one spot, and then I'm gonna push down, making sure I get the beautiful edges just like we did on our card, and making sure that all of the paint on the surface of the leaf is making contact with the paper. Make sure my little stem gets in there too. And there we go. Again, I know it's a little bit abstract for kids, but what I was thinking is to use this as sort of a magnified version of a backdrop for insect puppets. So let me show you what I have here. Okay. So I went through a copy of my Sunset magazine that I happen to have on file, saving it for a rainy day, and I was able to find a butterfly and a ladybug, and then I also have another butterfly. So what I did was use a piece of tape to adhere them to a normal toothpick. You could use Q-tips, you could use popsicle sticks, anything that you have lying around. And then my idea was just to have kids be able to put on their own puppet show against the backdrops of leaves and grass for their very own insects. The other thing that's definitely possible is I have some stickers here, some jungle stickers that I had left over from a project, so you can do the same thing here. So I have a toothpick. All I'm gonna do is put my sticker on the very top of it. Sorry for the strange angle there. Let me make sure this is sticking. Okay, so if you didn't want to do insects and they wanted more of a jungle theme, you could use your elephant, your gorilla, and your toucan puppets that I've just created by simply putting stickers on toothpicks. And if your kids wanted to, you could use more of a jungle theme. hard with 3 characters and 2 hands, but that's the idea. I think this would be a great idea if you wanted to read with your kids, if you had a book about, the forest, the jungle, about insects, and then you could have them create their own story for you using this simple backdrop with puppets. So I hope you guys enjoyed getting dirty like I did today. We really appreciate you joining us for Thursday Craft at Home. Hope everyone is staying safe and healthy. And please, this is National Library Week, so we would love if you would find ways to connect with us online, digital, using our audiobooks, ebooks, staying up to date with our social media. And please, I loved getting pictures of the crafts you guys did for last week, so please do show me what you end up making in the comments below. All right, see you guys next time. Thanks so much for joining me.